preview show on RotoCurve. My name's Geoff Ulrich, and I'm your host. I go by Wave Goodbye on most major sites, and you can follow me on Twitter as at the Fantasy Grind. Yeah, so let's talk about last week. Last week was obviously huge for fantasy golf in the industry. DraftKings had their Millionaire Maker tournament going on. I know I had a lot of fun sweating the event. Went off without a hitch. I think maybe the greatest thing for me was seeing it fill up so quickly. It filled up about 12 hours before, and I actually ended up having a lineup in 28th place for the overall tournament, so that was pretty exciting as well. Actually, one of the first things I'm going to do with the show today is I'm going to kind of go over the winner's lineup, the guy who won $1 million. I believe his name was Brett Marino. And I'll go over my own lineup that finished in 28th place. And yeah, so there it is. That's my lineup. That is what got me 28th place. So as you can see, I obviously nailed Jordan Spieth, and I usually start most of my lineups, and I kind of recommend for those who are beginning to start your lineups with a stud player. And this lineup, I obviously had a lot of lineups within the tournament, but this one was centered around Jordan Spieth. He was my stud player. So from there, I kind of went, and I went a little bit off the board. I used Phil Mickelson in this lineup. Phil ends up being a really good tournament play. He scores a lot of birdies, made a couple eagles as well, had a 3 birdie streak. So he obviously got a bonus point there. One thing you really have to remember, especially if you're just starting playing fantasy golf on DraftKings, is that they offer there's a lot more points for golfers who make a lot of birdies and make a lot of eagles. So relatively speaking, you don't worry too much if a guy makes a lot of bogeys if he's offsetting that by making a lot of birdies. And Phil is a guy who makes a lot of birdies. He actually led the field in birdies at the Shell Houston Open. Made a lot of birdies this week, obviously finished second. So he had the second highest fantasy score for the week. So nailing those 2 guys was huge for me. My other 4 players were all kind of value picks. Russell Henley, he ended up being, in my opinion, sort of the value pick of the week. He actually only finished in 21st, but he ended up with 84 fantasy points. Again, just shows you how powerful it is. He made a lot of birdies and eagle and had a couple bonus points. So my other value plays, Hunter Mahan, Ryan Moore, Ian Poulter, all did well. Not quite enough to get me into first, but pretty good. So let's take a look at the winners lineup here. I think I got it on. No, I don't. Let's see here. There it is. Okay. So Brett Marino's lineup, he ended up nailing, this was actually the optimal lineup on DraftKings for the week. So this was the highest scoring lineup you could have possibly made. He ended up nailing the first 3 spots, obviously Phil Mickelson, Justin Rose, Jordan Spieth. And then he nailed all the value picks. So Russell Henley, he was a guy I kind of was on and kind of suggested in my picks for the week, but he also nailed Charlie Hoffman and Kevin Na, who were only 6,000 apiece, yet scored over 80 fantasy points. And that's what allowed him to roster Phil Mickelson, Justin Rose, and Jordan Spieth together. Having those 3 value picks along with Phil, Justin, and Jordan Spieth, that's what allowed him to roster the best lineup. So that was it. That was that's my lineup, and that was the $1 million winning lineup as well. Obviously, DraftKings has already jumped back into the boat kind of for the next major. They have a $2.5 million millionaire maker up for the U.S. Open. That's starts June 18th, so that's already in the lobby. Victiv's already announced the Fantasy Golf 75K tournament for the U.S. Open. In their lobby, it's a little bit different. It's a qualifier tournament, actually, but it's something to keep in mind as well. So let's talk about this week. This week, the tournament, the tour, I should say, heads to Hilton Head, RBC Heritage. Hilton Head's it's a lot different tournament, a lot different course, I should say, than the players have sort of been on recently. Par 71, shorter course, so power here really isn't the name of the game. A lot tighter fairways, small greens. If you look at the guys who have done well here in the past, you see names like Matt Kuchar, Jim Furyk, Luke Donald, guys who don't hit it far, but guys who are really excellent players around the green. So those are the kind of guys that I am sort of focusing on for the week. Some stats to keep in mind: strokes gained putting, scrambling, driving accuracy, proximity from the fairway. All really important on a course like this because the greens are so small. You want to hit as many greens as possible. The guys who are really deadly accurate, they're kind of the ones who take over. And the other last thing I should say is that this is a wind-exposed course. It's on the ocean. Wind can play a factor here. Good wind players are really valuable in a week like this. So with that in mind, I am going to take you through the roster for the week. Let's take a look here. We have, make sure I'm on the right page. Yeah, so for this week, at the top of the list here, we have obviously Jordan Spieth coming back from his Masters win. He was obviously huge in the Masters. Obviously paid off well there. I'm not so sure how great his motivation is going to be this week. It's tough to say. He's still not too expensive. I expect him to be fairly highly owned, but I'm personally going to be fading him. I think he's going to be a little burned out. He's been on Letterman on this week. Tons of media stuff. I think he's too expensive. There's a couple guys up here around the 10K range that I'm really focusing on this week. One of them, Zach Johnson. Zach had a very good Masters. He's gone 9, 20, and 9 in his last 3 starts. So his game's really picked up. And he's the type of guy who really thrives on a course where power isn't that big a deal. Doesn't hit it very far, but he's got really good driving accuracy and generally good around the greens as well. His putting hasn't been great this year, but he's really picked it up lately. I think this course suits him well. And more importantly, I think he's been playing well lately. So he is one of my main picks this week. The next guy I'm kind of focusing on at this top price range actually is Ian Poulter. Poulter was one of the best players actually at the Masters on the weekend. He shot consecutive 5 under pars. He's been playing very, very well so far this season as well. Obviously had a couple close calls at the Honda Classic, and I believe another event as well. He was sort of in the mix. Really just been playing solid golf. I think this course sets up really well for Ian Poulter this week. I'm going to be rostering him quite a bit. I think at 10,000, he comes in cheaper than Matt Kuchar, comes in cheaper than Jim Furyk, and he's been playing better than both those guys. So for me, he's a really good play. I'm not sure how much people are going to be on him. I assume he'll be fairly popular, but maybe not quite as popular as some of those other guys. So scrolling down, there's a couple guys in the 9,000 range. I think Charlie Hoffman's going to be an extremely popular play this week. Coming off some really big performances. Obviously at a top 10 at the Masters, we just talked about him. Luke Donald has a very good history at this event, but hasn't been playing well. I could see him going well this week. But the other 2 guys that I'm kind of focusing on are Webb Simpson and Russell Henley. Henley's a guy in particular. He's been on a roll lately. Led the field in greens and regulation at the Shell Houston Open. Really good young player. Really sort of thrives at courses too. That like this week. So he's gone well at the Sony Open. He's gone really well at, I believe it was the McGladrey Classic, it's called, out on Sea Island. Another sort of tight wind-exposed course. So very similar to the course they're playing this week. He's 6th here in 2003. He's been playing really well lately. I think he's going to be in the mix. I think Russell Henley is going to be one of the top plays this week. And I also like Webb Simpson. Webb finished runner-up here a couple years ago. He started the season well, and this is his type of course as well. So in that range, those are a couple guys that I'm targeting. If we take it down a little bit further, there's some guys in this range that are kind of interesting. Pat Perez has a very nice history of this course. He's actually been playing pretty solidly of late as well. I'm actually sort of going to be targeting guys a little bit cheaper than that. A couple guys that I'd like to sort of point out. Russell Knox. Another player who really sort of thrives at shorter courses, doesn't have a huge amount of length, but he's almost won a couple times at the Honda Classic, which is sort of a correlation event. And by correlation, I mean the courses are sort of similar, and they sort of the same sort of golfers have success there. So Knox is a player that finished 9th at this event last year. I think he's going to have a really good shot this week. He's been off for the last couple weeks. Obviously didn't play the Masters. Should be well rested and should really be ready to come into this event and sort of, aim for his first win. He's a player who's sort of still aiming for his first win. I think he's an eventual winner on tour. The other guy I'm kind of focusing on in this price range is Brendan Todd. Same kind of deal, hits it accurate, really good around the greens. I believe he's 9th in scrambling for the year, so he's a very good short game player. Really sort of suits this tournament well, I think. And he missed the cut at the Masters. I believe he shot 80 in the first round. But sometimes that's okay. It's his first trip to the Masters. I won't be shocked if he comes in here and really just sort of wants to put last week behind him and plays really well. The course definitely suits him. And yeah, he's a player I'm targeting at 7,002 and at 7,300. Knox and Todd both offer you a lot of roster flexibility, which is really important. So those are two very important guys that I'm kind of targeting this week. Going down a bit further, Rory Sabatini is a guy I kind of want to mention. Has a very good history at this event. I believe he's made the cut the last 5 times, but all those times have been top 20 performances and possibly even a couple top 10s in there. So he's someone who really has sort of taken to the course. Obviously a pretty good win player as well. And the other guy that I really want to mention in this price range is John Hugh or John Huh. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. He's at 6,700. He's made his last 5 cuts on tour, and for all intents and purposes, he's never really been the most consistent golfer. But this year, he's sort of turned a corner, and he has really thrived on courses like this in the past too. He's won on tour. He won at a similar course in Mexico a couple of years ago. He's had top finishes at Colonial, which is another shorter course. Not a big hitter, but he's ranked very highly in scrambling. Actually ranked pretty highly in putting this year as well. He's been playing really well lately, and he was actually 3rd in this event last year as well. 2nd or 3rd, I can't remember, but he was in the top 5. So he obviously likes the course. He's playing well, and for my money, I think he's gonna be. I think he's really set sort of for another good performance, just based on how he's been playing. So let's keep going down the list here and see. Camilo Villegas actually has a very nice record here. Another guy who's had success at the Sony Open, so not a bad play. Ben Martin was 3rd here last year. Another guy who missed the cut at the Masters, but another guy who tends to fare well on these type of courses. He was actually 5th at Bay Hill about 3 weeks ago as well. Going down a bit further, there's some guys in the 5,000 range I wouldn't mind using for sort of a GPP play, a guy you're just trying to sort of round your roster out with to make the cut and get those sort of extra fantasy points. For beginners, that's important. You always want to focus on guys who are going to have a good chance of making the cut, especially when you go this low down in salary. So Scott Brown is a guy who was 6th here last year. He's played pretty well this year. I believe he was 10th at the Puerto Rico Open, which is another course that the players have to deal with wind. He's a pretty strong putter as well. So he's a guy I would have a pretty strong feeling with that he's going to make the cut this week or have a very good chance of making the cut. At 5,000, Spencer Levine has actually played this event. The past six times he's played this event, I should say, he's made the cut. So he hasn't been playing very well lately, but at the same time, I think he's got a very good chance of making the cut this week. And at his price, at 5,000, you can roster a really nice roster around him. So he's a guy I wouldn't mind chancing in a few lineups if I was going to go that direction and try and sort of go top heavy. Moving down, Scott Langley's actually another good win player. If you're looking for sort of a guy to fill out a roster and make you the cut, he's someone else I consider. And kind of the last player I'd mention maybe is Ben Crane. Crane's a strong putter, good touch around the greens. Doesn't hit it very far, but again, length doesn't really matter this week. And I'm really looking for guys that have that touch around the green, have a good course history. Crane, I believe, has actually made the cut here 8 out of 9 times. So something really to consider. I'm not really so worried about recent form this week, as I am looking for guys who have good course history. This is a course that's a little bit unique in setup, a little bit unique in terms of doesn't necessarily favor the big hitters, doesn't favor guys with power, but it does favor guys around the green. And so guys like Ben Crane, people with good course histories, I'm giving them extra weight this week. And those are the type of guys I'm especially looking for when I go down in salary. So guys like Ben Crane, guys like Spencer Levine, guys like Scott Brown, who have nice histories at this event, have proven they can play the course, and have proven that you know, they're gonna have a good chance of making the cut this week for you. So with that in mind, yeah, when you're making your rosters, really focus on trying to get those 6 solid rosters, 6 solid golfers, I should say. You know, in terms of finishing it high in a GPP or putting together a high cash lineup, I can't emphasize enough that you really want to have 6 solid players. You want to have as good a chance at getting six golfers through to the weekend. That's how you're going to get those high scores. That's how you're going to get those cashes and 50-50 lineups. So looking at players that when you start to go down in salary to fill your lineup out, you're not so worried about, you know, are they going to get 10th? Are they going to get 5th? But it's more about, can they make that cut? Can they get me 4 rounds of scoring so that I can round my roster off and supplement my higher salary players? And you know, that's a little tip for beginners. RotoCurve are always kind of trying to increase players' learning curves and yeah, help you with make your lineups. So that's the preview show this week. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you guys got something out of it. Yeah, and we'll be back next week with I believe it is the Louisiana event, the Zurich Classic, actually another Pete Dye course, another interesting event, and we'll be counting down the days until the Players, which is sort of the next big event on the calendar. So yeah, keep tuning in. Again, you can follow me on Twitter at thefantasygrind.com. Keep tuning into RotoCurve. There's great information there always. And yeah, we will talk to you again next week.